sparrows. So I'm going to start with an example of a species we all know that is polymorphic, the Harvard undergrad. Now, Harvard admits undergrads from all walks of life, and in fact tries, I think, to get good diversity. But I think a lot of undergrads make a certain kind of mistake in their first couple of years. They might make friends with people they know. Like the hippie might make friends with a bunch of hippies, right? Athletic person might make friends with another athletic person, etc. But you know, by their second year, they've figured it out, or their third year, and now everybody is making friends with different people and getting different perspectives on life and the way that the world works, etc. It's very beneficial, is my point. This kind of could be construed as an example of disassortative pairing. Now, nature has this already figured out. The white-throated sparrow also comes in different morphs. Here we have tan white-throated sparrows and white white-throated sparrows. And what's interesting about the white white-throated sparrows is they're very different behaviorally and in terms of color from the tan white-throated sparrows. Whites are aggressive, they're promiscuous, they leave the nest to go find a new mate after they've mated already. They have a song that you've probably heard. It goes, and if you hear this song, it's probably from a white morph white-throated sparrow because the tans don't really sing that much. They spend their time caring for young, and they're less promiscuous and less aggressive. Now, the interesting thing is, most of the time, whites have to mate with tans, and tans have to mate with whites. If you get two whites mate together, they end up not taking care of their young, and their young will die. And the tans aren't really that into it, so they don't ever try hard enough to go find another tan mate. So that never happens. So the reason that there are two morphs is due to a cluster of genes that I'm going to define as a supergene. Now, a supergene is a group of genes that are inherited together because they're linked and they're functionally related in some evolutionary sense. So you can see how the tan and the white would be a classic example of a supergene. In this case, it has a name. There's an allele that controls for white. It's called 2M. So what you get is the tan white-throated sparrows are homozygous. They have two normal copies of chromosome 2, whereas the white white-throated sparrows have a heterozygous genotype on chromosome 2. They have chromosome 2, and then they have chromosome 2M that contains the white supergene. So it was recently discovered that 2M arose from a series of chromosomal inversions. So basically, it used to be that all white-throated sparrows were brown, were tan, and at some point, a large portion of chromosome 2 was flipped, and then flipped again. And you can see here, I've outlined the chromosome in a fairly intuitive color scheme. We go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. And you can see then how it gets flipped first, this portion here. So now we have red and then everything backwards. And then a smaller portion gets flipped again. So now we have this portion is flipped, this portion's in the wrong place, and you get the white morph. So again, just to remind you, tan birds are homozygous and have two chromosomes without inversion, and white birds are heterozygous. They have one copy of chromosome 2 without the inversion, and one copy of chromosome 2 with the inversion. There is a lab whose PI has devoted her life to researching the behavioral differences between the tan and the white-throated sparrows, who discovered and characterized this sort of disassortative mating that they do, and her name is Elena M. Tuttle. Originally, she was a field biologist, and she wrote a lot of field research papers about the behavior of the white-throated sparrow in terms of tan versus white, and the way that they mate and the way that they act, recording call frequency and all this stuff that I just talked about. But recently, she changed and became a population biologist, which looks a little bit more boring. Her group went out and got DNA samples from 49 different white-throated sparrows and put together and sequenced them all using deep sequencing. And then they published this paper, which is the topic of my talk, Divergence and Functional Degradation of a Sex